Welcome to the NBA DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith. We're going to break down the 7-game DraftKings slate for Thursday, January 25th. This is a bit of a weird slate. Unlike the past few slates, and honestly, most slates this year that we've broken down, there's not an obvious path to follow here, which can be difficult as far as choosing which studs to pay for, how to build your lineup, and choosing which values to roll with. But it also can be good because ownership's going to be majorly split. And that means I don't think you have to try super hard to get different. So it's going to be interesting. And it is only 139 Central right now. So I'm assuming on a 7-game slate, something is going to come in the way of injury news to hopefully open things up. So basically, we're going to break down the games and point you to the matchups or the options that we like, talk about ownership, projections, and matchups. And hopefully that process helps you get yourself to a winning lineup. If anything we say here does help you, please like this video and also subscribe to the channel so you can be alerted to future videos like this. All right, Taylor, so the first game on the docket is the Utah Jazz at the Washington Wizards, 245.5 total. The Jazz are that rare 7.5-point road favorite. This looks like an amazing DFS environment, perhaps the best spot on the slate, depending. Starting with this game, who are you liking on the Jazz side?
Yeah, it is a good spot. Utah is just going to be really popular, it looks like, in the first game of the night. Washington did just fire their coach today, so maybe we'll see some kind of scheme change or something, but who knows? Obviously, that happened today, and he probably hasn't had time to implement anything new, so it's going to be the same old shitty team we've seen the whole time. Markkanen stands out, of course, 8K flat. Great matchup for bigs in particular. Not that he plays like a traditional big, but good enough matchup, good enough price on him. Sexton, price probably hasn't come up enough, certainly not for the matchup. Kessler, 4,900, looks pretty good for him, even in a kind of minutes-limited reserve role. Collins, Clarkson, Chris Dunn still starting and under 4K. Fontecchio just over 4K. Olynyk all the way down to 3.6. You can make a case for pretty much anyone in this rotation at this point in the day.
Yeah, I think the only deterrent here is the level of chalk here. I mean, Markkanen is coming in at 38% ownership, and that might actually only be higher depending on how the thing goes. Obviously, he's a great price, good projection, awesome matchup, but that ownership is a little bit dicey for a game that quite easily could turn into a blowout. I will say the only guy that I really, really like here for value, since this slate is absent of it, is Fontecchio. He's going to play push for 30 minutes. He's going to shoot. His projection's decent for that 4.1 price tag. So I'm probably looking at him unless something else opens up. And obviously, I agree. I see the merit in every Jazz starter, but the ownership is a bit worrisome. On the other side are the Wizards. They are abhorrent on the year, 7.36 on the year, 3-17 at home, 1-9 over the last 10. Like you said, they just canned their coach, and you really never know what that's going to lead to. Watch them be like bottom pace now after being second in pace all year, right? Just completely shift it. However, how they have been running second in pace, 28th in defensive efficiency, they are an awesome matchup when they don't get completely blown out. Assuming this game stays close, who do you like for Washington?
Nobody really ever stands out for this team. Suppose you can make a case for Avdia. Had a big night last night. The minutes are typically pretty high, but his scoring output last night was certainly not what we could normally expect from him. He's not a big usage guy to begin with. But 6-1, good matchup against I think a fast-paced Utah team. Don't mind that. And then Kuz for just under 8K. I don't think that's bad, especially if Markkanen's going to be popular at the same price, essentially. I think Kuzma is a viable pivot. But otherwise, I'm not prioritizing anything. It's still a pretty deep rotation with not very good players in it.
Yeah, I mean, this obviously is a viable game stack, and I love the note about Kuz as a viable pivot off of chalky Markkanen. I agree with that big time. The Jazz are 29th in fast break points allowed and 29th in three-point makes allowed. Those are two things that Kuz can be pretty darn good at. He will hoist at will. And he's also, he's 9th in fast break points scored per game. So this actually is an amazing matchup for Kuz. The projection is good, the price is good, and his ownership is not that inflated. So I actually like Kuz quite a bit. I think I would be over the field here if I'm doing a lot of lineups, and he might end up making my single entry depending on what else opens up. Heading over to Philadelphia and Indiana. Indiana is still without Tyrese Halliburton. They're still working in Pascal Siakam as well. The Sixers are 5.5 road favorites in a 237 game total. Obviously, Joel Embiid looks awesome. Who else do you like for Philly here?
Embiid again. Indiana allows the most points in the paint per game, so it's about as good of a spot as you can find for Embiid, even after he put up like 105 the other night.
Yeah.
He's going to be really chalky, I would think, even without much value. I think people will still be inclined to cram him in because it is such a good spot, and he did just score 70 real points in the last game. Tyrese Maxey is in a good spot here too. Pace should suit him pretty well. Tobias is questionable, so if he's out, maybe we're looking at Kelly Oubre, Nick Batum potential value and increased minutes at the forward spots. Not really psyched about that, but I think Oubre in particular is kind of worth a flyer just because he has some upside as a scorer on this team.
Yeah, Tobias is out for sure. So with Embiid, even with him being chalky, how much are you leaning into him being a core play?
Yeah, I'm just going to pay for him. The slate has some uncertainty with news later on, like LeBron being questionable, but Jokic isn't in quite as good of a spot tonight against the Knicks. And, Embiid is Embiid. I think Embiid has a significantly higher ceiling than Jokic these days with Denver essentially fully healthy. So I don't really care about the ownership. I'm likely to play a lot of Embiid no matter what.
Yeah, it is quite a good spot. And I'm wondering if recency bias will kind of work the other way, whereas people might say, well, there's no way he's getting 100 again,
Yeah, he's not getting 100 again. But
I mean, is he not? I don't know. They don't really have much resistance still, though. But yeah, I'm with you. I like Embiid a lot. Okay, on the other side, Siakam actually projects decently, and for me, the price is what stands out the most, especially with Halliburton gone. 7.1K for what Siakam can bring to the table is pretty interesting. Who do you like for Indy?
Yeah, that is a really good price on Siakam. Maybe the lowest we've seen all year and probably the lowest we will see all year, I would imagine. He hasn't been great so far, but still working his way in. The matchup's also not a good one. Philly's quite good defensively with Embiid in there. Miles Turner, not really into that, even at a discount on him. They just have still a ton of wings that can cycle through the rotation. TJ McConnell came off the bench in the last game with Nembhard in 20 minutes. He's still capable of getting there for 5-4. I don't think that's the worst tournament play, but Philly in general, when they're largely healthy, except for Halliburton, is still not really a huge priority for me.
Yeah, I will note that Jalen Smith is questionable, so it's possible we see a little bit extra run for somebody like Isaiah Jackson. He's obviously a good points per minute kind of guy. So since we have no real value to speak of on the slate yet, he's at least on my radar if that ends up being the case. In agreement on everybody else. Heading over to Minnesota and Brooklyn. The Timberwolves are playing on a back-to-back. Mike Conley is once again questionable. And despite that, they're still 3.5-point road favorites against the Nets with a disgusting 217 total. Obviously, Minnesota plays slow, and they defend extremely well. They have not been quite up to par in their last 3 or 4 games, but still not a good matchup for anybody, especially the wonky Nets, who you never can trust. So who are you liking on the Minnesota side, if anyone?
Not really anyone. This is their third game in 4 nights as well, so fatigue could be an issue for them. I never have an issue with Anthony Edwards. 8.4 is pretty cheap by his standards. Still has a ceiling, even though he's been somewhat tempered of late. Brooklyn doesn't really have great wing defenders to throw his way, so I think he's worth a dart throw. And Conley's fine if he plays. Should be pretty fresh since he missed the last 2 games, I think. So don't mind that if he's good to go. Alexander Walker, I guess, is a value play if he's out again, but not a big source of usage in this offense, even in the starting role. So not a great spot in this matchup either way.
Yeah, I'll be hoping that Conley sits again so we can look at Knopf for some value. He was okay yesterday, and at 4.5K, I would go right back to the well with him. Maybe since it's back-to-back and like you said, 3 games in 4 days, maybe they sit, Rudy or Cat or something too, and it opens up more value here. That would make the Timberwolves pretty enticing. And obviously I'd look at Naz Reid and Kyle Anderson for the most part, maybe Jade McDaniels too. As it stands, my preference would be Anthony Edwards, even though he is 200 more than Cat and set to get 2 fewer fantasy points. He's going to be completely unowned, and worth noting that the Nets are not very good in transition, and he is. He ranks 12th in fast break points scored per game. So he's definitely interesting. At his price point, though, with guys like Kuz and Markkanen right around him, I don't know if he's going to be a priority for me. On the Brooklyn side, obviously, this is a brutal matchup. I'm assuming nobody really stands out, but changed my mind.
Well, he was awful the other night, but Dinwiddie is even cheaper now at 5.2.
I wonder why.
18 minutes. I guess he got benched because he was just awful. So that's certainly possible again, but I think I'm willing to buy low on him. It's just cheap. Like he was 8K-ish before, like a couple weeks ago, and now he's barely over 5 on a slate with middling value. I don't think he's a bad dart throw. It's kind of the same story with Cam Johnson. I think he's cheap enough to be worth a look. 30-ish minutes every single night. And then Claxton, they'll need size against that Minnesota front line. So I don't think he's the worst kind of mid-range center play at 6'9".
Yeah, I mean, the prices are pretty good for the Nets. The problem is the matchup is brutal, and I don't see much of a ceiling here. So the Nets are full fade for me unless they randomly sit some guys. Denver and New York is the next game. The Nuggets are 2-point road favorites with a 222 total. So we're looking at a pretty slow-paced defensive game here for the most part. But both teams are at full strength. So starting with Denver, who stands out?
No one really. I mean, I guess you could play Jokic as the obvious pivot from Embiid because he's similarly priced and projected for no ownership. And I guess 5.6 for Aaron Gordon. You can kind of make the same case for those Nets as you can with Aaron Gordon, just kind of underpriced for the role he plays. But otherwise, not really seeing much here.
Yep, I agree. I think Jokic is a really good GPP pivot off of Embiid, and that's pretty much it. Jamal Murray's prices come up, so I'm not really that interested in him. So of course he's gonna go nuts again like he did the other night, right? So on the other side, you got the Knicks. It's for the most part it's Julius and Brunson. We all know that. Is there anybody else besides those guys that look good on this slate?
Is Hartenstein? He's questionable.
He is questionable.
I guess. I mean, he looks good if he's in. Foul trouble is a risk in this matchup, though. I suppose you can make the case for Precious or Jericho Sims again if Hartenstein's out. I don't think Precious will be quite as popular as he was the other day when he was almost outperformed by Jericho on the right side of that split.
Made no sense. So stupid.
It was annoying. And I guess Anunoby, just for the minutes, he's another sub 6K value, I think is fine, even if his ceiling isn't really tangible.
Yeah, 100%. I like OG at that price. He gets a ton of minutes. He never projects very well, but I think if a guy's going to be out there for 36, 37 minutes a game, I mean, sub 6K, he's in play for me. He'd be like the last guy in, like kind of like Mike Conley when we were talking about last night had he played. But it's tough to just ignore minutes like that. I will not go the Hartenstein route if he's in with Jokic right there. But if he's out, I'm going right back to the Precious man, because I don't buy Jericho Sims playing that well ever again, maybe.
Against Jokic, especially.
Yeah, especially against Jokic. So I probably actually would prefer Sims to start in that case, and then he gets in foul trouble and Precious comes in or something.
And he gets in foul trouble.
Yeah. Precious, his price has not come up that much. I think it moved up 300. So just keep an eye on Hartenstein, his status. Then we have Boston and Miami. The Celtics are 7.5-point road favorites, which is pretty steep considering A, it's on the road, and B, Miami's at full strength. I mean, Miami is on a pushover. Miami's pretty good. So it's a little bit of an interesting spread. Might tell us that the Heat could sit somebody here. That's something to keep an eye out for. 224 total, pretty low. It's going to be a slow defensive game for the most part. I don't love this game in general, but is there anybody you are liking starting with the Boston side?
No, they're fully healthy. I guess you can make a case for Drew Holiday for 6-1 because that's getting kind of cheap for him, but hasn't shown much of an upside with the rest of the starters in, so not super inclined to go there against this team. I'm guessing the spread is just Miami on a back-to-back after they lost to the Grizzlies last night.
Maybe.
So Boston's fresher and good. I'm assuming that's all it is.
Maybe. Certainly they overlooked Memphis, or they'll probably bring it for this game. I think the thing with Boston is every single guy here, mostly the starters, they all are really nice prices. The problem is they're all there and they're all healthy. So nobody really stands out projection-wise. At 9.7, probably Tatum would be the guy I would actually feel good about. But honestly, everybody else is playable, but they just any one of them could tank and any one of them could erupt. So I don't have a lean for that very reason. But if I did play a Boston guy, I'd probably just play Tatum at no ownership. On the Miami side, they are at full strength. Terry Rozier could end up sliding into the starting lineup. Kevin Love left with an illness last game, so we could see more Thomas Bryant off the bench. Probably something I'd be looking to avoid. But otherwise, they are at 100% here. Not a good matchup, but they're at home. Is there anybody on the Heat that stands out for you?
Not really. I guess Bam, if anyone, for 8.5, just because he's normally a 9K-ish kind of guy. But Boston's really good about protecting the rim with Porzingis in there. So not an ideal spot for him. I think it's worth a flyer just because it's going to be contrarian. But that's really it. Rozier is way overpriced. Hero is probably fairly priced, but not something worth prioritizing in a really bad matchup against really good defensive guards.
No, it's the same exact thing with the Boston side. All these guys, their prices are actually really, really nice. Projections, not so much. When everybody's at full strength like this, you can play these guys, but it's a guessing game. There's nothing definitive that tells you Jimmy Butler is going to be a smash play. His price is great. His projection isn't. So, and neither is the matchup. So I'm probably just going to avoid this game, which definitely means it's going into triple overtime. Moving on, we got perhaps the game of the night. Definitely one of the top three, I'd say. Kings and Warriors. Sacramento on the road as 2-point favorites. A very healthy 242.5 total. The Dubs just played last night and blew out the Hawks. So I don't think they'll be super tired since they blew them out at the end there. But starting with the King side, who do you like?
Malik Monk is the one that really stands out for 6K. Minutes have been up lately. Mike Brown seems to have a pretty condensed circle of trust. Malik Monk is in it. Good per minute guy, even off the bench. Happy to get to him, even at ownership. Sabonis, if you don't want to pay all the way up for the Embiid Jokic tier, he's the next best thing at 9.9. And I guess you can make the minutes case for Fox and Murray. But otherwise, it's pretty thin. Harrison Barnes is probably the lowest floor starter in the whole league at this point. He's cheap and the 30-minute projection, but even in that projection, does not project very well for the dollar.
Yeah, I like the projection for Sabonis. He does project to be a bit owned, as does your boy Malik Monk. But they're in play. De'Aaron Fox has a good price, solid projection. He's in play. Kevin Huerter is an interesting value considering we don't have any right now. So if that doesn't change greatly, it's worth noting that the Warriors give up the 23rd most three-point attempts in the league per game. So that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to make his shots. He's been very erratic lately, or, forever. But in his last 4 games, he had 2 monstrous games. So he's not really a consistent dude, but if he's hitting his shots, he's actually pretty viable. 5.2 is a bit rich, but like I said, the volume or the value is lacking. On the other side are the Dubs. Stephen Curry has spiked a little bit in price. He's got an okay projection. And obviously this game total is pretty alluring. Is there anybody on the Golden State side that you like?
Not really. They're essentially healthy except for CP3. Kuminga made all 11 of his shots last night. Can't really bank on that happening again, but the minutes are nice. They've been up, even with Draymond back last night. I suppose you could make a case for him, kind of in the Aaron Gordon range, but I don't know. That seems like kind of a chase to me, and I don't really see much else worth getting to.
Yeah, it does feel a bit chasey. I don't love the projection on Clay, but in theory, it's a really good spot. The Kings are 29th in opponent 3-point percentage allowed, so that's not good. And obviously, the Warriors are no stranger to hoisting from long range. So honestly, Clay in that mid-range area, he's going to be completely unowned. He's an okay hammer play here. Well, not a true hammer play because there's one more game. And Curry, again, for the second day in a row, looks pretty good to me. It's a good matchup. The Kings don't defend outside very well, and they're going to need him to keep pace with them. So he's not a priority play for me by any means, but once again, unowned is a little bit interesting. Last game of the night, we have the Bulls visiting the Lakers. The Lakers are 4.5-point home favorites, which doesn't really tell us anything because the Bulls aren't very good. It's 228.5 total, which is respectable. LeBron James is questionable. I feel like everybody else, except for Zach LaVine, also being out for the Bulls, everybody else is going to be playing for both sides. Starting with the Bulls, who do you like?
The big three, all under 8K again, look pretty good. Vucevic is the one that stands out the most just because he's an upper range center, not really necessarily priced like one. They all get more usage with LaVine out. I don't think they're bad. I don't think I would play more than two together of these expensive Bulls, but I'm interested in all three. Kobe seems to be getting the lowest ownership of that group, interestingly enough. Pat Williams, just as a pure value minutes play, I think is one of the better values on the slate. Bigger role with LaVine out, been starting as well. And I guess Caruso, you can make the revenge case for him, but, Caruso, not really a guy you ever have to have. So yeah, if he's going to be popular, I'm not super psyched about that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying here. I would definitely lean towards Kobe. Basically, whatever guy for the Bulls in that big three that is going to be the least owned, that's who I'm going to gravitate towards. They all project well. It's a really good matchup. The Lakers are 28th in three-point makes allowed per game and 25th in fast break points allowed per game. So, Kobe is going to be running the offense, so he can get some transition baskets and some open shots. So he really does a little bit of everything. So if he's going to be the lowest owned guy here, I like him quite a bit. Moving on the other side, obviously LeBron's status is pretty important, but we don't have the information yet. And by the way, Anthony Davis is actually questionable too. Does he still have his double Achilles soreness thing going on?
He's always questionable. He never misses, so I'm assuming it's in.
So obviously he looks really good up top. Vooch isn't stopping him necessarily, so he's not even that owned at barely 10% ownership here. He's very interesting as a major pivot off of chalky Embiid. Do you like Brow or any other Lakers tonight?
Yeah, I think he's more of a Sabonis pivot probably, just because he's 300 more. Yeah, he looks great. Obviously, if James is out, he's probably the smash play of the slate, and that news may come out late, so could get an ownership discount on him. LeBron for 9.2 is really cheap if he plays. I have no read on whether he will after he was prematurely ruled out of the last one, but if he's in, I'm really interested for 9.2. I think full minutes can be a reasonable expectation for that. And if he's out, it's back to D'Lo and Reeves. Russell still looks good at 7K, even with LeBron projected in. Reeves for 5.9 is fine. I think the matchup's better for him tonight than it was against the Clippers, and I don't think he'll be nearly as popular as he was 2 days ago.
Yeah, and obviously if LeBron is out, you can look at Rui or Taurean Prince as well. The Lakers look pretty appealing, and right now, since LeBron James is projected to be back, they are not getting nearly enough ownership. So that's certainly something we could prepare for. Now, going into the slate immediately, I was looking at Joel Embiid as the top play. And that's not very hard to do because he's been amazing. So it's not like it takes skill to know that. But he's also got the best matchup, right? So I can totally see sticking with Embiid here as the top play. But honestly, if we don't get news early about LeBron and Anthony Davis is projecting for sub 10% ownership, I might just go with Anthony Davis as my top spend here.
I think that's viable. I mean, if he's going to be less popular, he's got maybe not as high a ceiling, but certainly enough of a ceiling.
All right, so one more segment to run through here. Actually, two. We'll do real quick. So, piggybacking off what I just said, who is your number one guy you're building around? Is that going to be Embiid or is it going to be somebody else?
It's probably Embiid right now, but we'll see what happens over the next several hours. I think Utah with Embiid will be really popular, but it's not a bad way to build, all things considered.
All right, and going on the fade side of things, let's take a real quick look at ownership. Let's see. So, yeah, as expected, Markkanen is the chalkiest guy. So I actually love Markkanen in this spot. He projects extremely well, very good price, awesome matchup. But if he's going to be almost 40% owned or possibly more, that feels like an easy fade to me, because obviously Washington can get blown out very easily, or Markkanen can just fall short of expectations here. And there's other ways to go. You mentioned the Kuzma pivot, and there's a few other plays out there, or we could kind of work our way up. Or obviously the Bulls guys we talked about too, kind of in a similar price range. So while that doesn't feel good, that's just too much ownership for a guy who can be a little bit volatile. Who are you looking at as far as the fade games go?
Yeah, I think the value guys, Chris Dunn and Kelly Olynyk, they could easily not even play 20 minutes. And if they're going to be double-digit owned, that just seems like something to get away from. Take a shot on other options in the range, Patrick Williams, even Reggie Jackson, if he's going to be less popular than the Jazz cheap guys. I'm fine with that as a lower-owned pivot with a similar range of outcomes.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, that is going to do it for us. Ending it here right before the 27th marker, if we can. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, if we helped you at all, you can give us a like on this video, and as a reminder to subscribe to the channel to get alerted for future videos. With that, thanks for watching, and good luck.